Okay, everybody, good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, and I am Luli Castro, Swiftland's Executive Director. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Arresting the Time Robbers in Your Life, and today's presenter, the incomparable Linda Bruno. Linda has been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life applications. Please welcome Linda Bruno and enjoy her webinar today.
Thanks so much, Ms. Luli, and welcome everybody to today's session. I wanted to give you just a little brief explanation about how I came up with the title for today's program. When I was thinking about, in my own personal life, how little things in my life drain my time away, and then I grumble and complain because I don't have time to do this or that, and I was thinking they're robbing me of my time, and so that's sort of how I came up with the name. But then as I thought about that, I thought it's pretty appropriate if you think about it, because the things that rob us of our time are very much like real robbers out in the world. I think we can look at them in a similar way. Even if we lock them away, when they get out, they start robbing again. So that's why I put the message in there about downloading or printing out your handouts for today, because chances are, first of all, I hope that you will make some changes based on what we talk about today, because I've got a lot of tips for you. But the other possibility is that you'll make those changes and you might slide back into former habits, as in the robbers come back. Here's what I want you to hear. And sometimes we make it really easy for them to rob us, don't we? I always think about the articles that come out that say, well, the front door was open and, they could tell nobody was home or whatever, and somebody robbed the place, and you're thinking, well, that made it kind of easy. But we do the same things. I told a friend years ago he wanted to put Mahjong on my computer, and I said, no, I don't want it. And he said, oh, it's a really fun game. You'll really like it. And I said, I don't want it, because if it's a really fun game, I know what I'll do. I'll play the fun game, and there goes my time. So I have allowed solitaire on my computer, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Those of you who know me know that I tell you my failings, if you will, in these areas. And one of them is, if there's something that I'm dreading, or I'm not quite sure how to start, or I just need a refresh or whatever, I will play solitaire. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with anything that comes into our life and takes time from us. But the danger comes in when I'm on the third or fourth game because I'm determined to win, and I look up and 7 minutes have gone by. Because if you do those kinds of things, it doesn't sound like much, but if you do them often enough, you have big chunks of time missing from your day, missing from your week, that you could have used for something more important to you. I was going to say more productive, and that's certainly a part of it. I want to be productive in my work, and I'm sure you do too. But sometimes it's that we rob time away from people or other things that we're interested in, just because we've gotten in the habit of doing that. According to brain science, a lot of the things that we do create little pathways in our brain. And every time we do that similar thing again, the pathway in our brain is deeper and more comfortable. And so that's where we head when we have time in our day. So I just wanted to kind of set this up for you so that you would know where it's coming from and what we're going to address. Several of the things we're going to talk about today are only on your handouts. I certainly will introduce them. I'll talk to you about them, but the actual lists are on your handouts so that you didn't have to spend a lot of time writing on those particular pieces. There are some areas I'm going to ask you to fill in the blanks, but there are pages on here that if you've got them in front of you, it will help you follow along. So let's get started. Page 1. The first thing I want to ask you is, on the entire page of page 1, there's a whole big long list of things that could potentially rob you of your time on a typical day. And what I'd like you to do is scan the list and be gut-wrenching honest with yourself. Put a check mark beside anything that you're pretty sure robs you of time during the day. So take a moment to do that. It shouldn't take more than a minute, minute and a half to just scan the list. Don't overanalyze. I feel like I should be humming a game show song. Da, 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 da. Okay, you probably have your check marks done. Now I want you to go back and circle any check marks of an item that you have some control over. So any of the check marks that you've listed that might take time out of your day and rob you of that time, circle any check marks that you will admit you actually have some control over. You notice I didn't say all control or total control. I just said you might have some control over those particular ones. Now, which one of those circled items really convicted you of the little aha moment that said, there's one I could get some control over? Would you type that into the chat box, please? What's one thing on this list or something that came to mind for you that isn't even on the list? That's perfectly okay too. Yeah, Susan, phone calls, chit chat, surfing, chit chat, chit chat, chit chat. And I never want you not to be friendly, of course, but we know that the chit chat can get extensive, can it? Failure to listen, obligations. I'm just reading a few of them that are popping up here. You see the variety, and chances are that some of them that have popped up may not be your worst, but they do invade your life and you do have a little bit of control. You know, the reason I ask you to put that in the chat box is not because I'm going to come back to you in 30 days using this chat box and say, hey, are you doing what you said you weren't doing enough of it in the chat box? The reason is when we put it in writing and it's facing us, we are more likely at the end of this webinar to say, you know what, I'm not going to probably do everything that I heard in the webinar today. Some of it won't even apply, but here's something I can get control over. One of the reasons I want you to focus on at least one thing that you will commit to you, not to me, because I can't follow up with you, but you will commit to you to change before we're done today, is because when you feel that sense of success and accomplishment after you've made some strides in that area, I'm not looking for perfection, folks. I'm looking for you to maybe lessen the chit chat, to maybe become more aware of when you're using it as an excuse not to work. We all do those things. Then once you feel that sense of accomplishment that you've made some progress, you'll want to do more of it because what gets rewarded gets repeated. One of the things that I jotted down on my own notes is under putting out fires. Some of us put out fires and people will tell me I put out the same fires all the time. And my question then, and now I'm stepping on toes, is why are they the same fires? And why do you have to always put them out? Because I tell people I step on toes, I try not to make them bleed. But I want to push you hard enough to make a change in your life. That's what I'm here for today. So if somebody's coming to me with the same questions over and over again, something's missing. Either I'm not delegating or I'm not giving out enough information or I'm not clear in my communication or I'm not providing enough training or something's going on. And Danny, you're absolutely right. So much of what we do with time robbers is absolutely about being disciplined. And it could be them sometimes, Susan, but then what's the issue with them? And do we need to push a little harder that they have to take responsibility kind of a thing? Danny, you were right on target. Everything I talk about today pretty much has to do with discipline, doesn't it? And again, I'm not asking you to go from talking to 19 people every day for 10 minutes at a time to talking to nobody. That's not what we're looking for. But what if you lessened it to 15 people and went down to 4 minutes at a time? It would save you some time, wouldn't it? Brittany says sometimes you end up putting out the same fire because a higher up knows you can put out the fire in 2 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. And that's true too. But then, Brittany, I always tell people open the conversation, because if it's taking you away from your regular work and the things that you know you need to get done and you're not able to, then the conversation needs to happen. Right? So lots of different things can cause this. I put on my last line that was blank, boredom. It robs me of my time, because that's when I then allow other distractions to take hold, the ones that aren't listed here, the texting back and forth with somebody or whatever, because it's caused by boredom, isn't it? So the boredom, it's creating a time robber in my life, or I'm not working as effectively because I'm bored or whatever. So you just start to get a sense for that. And then as we go through today, you can start to funnel down the things that you would like to work on. Folks, none of this is rocket scientists. I don't have a time robber degree. I have a life degree and I've lived these. It's what I've experienced, and that's why I'm sharing them with you, is because I know where they creep up on us, and I do understand what might happen that we're not taking care of them. You scrolled so fast for me, I couldn't see if any of you put down procrastination, and if you did or didn't, part of the reason we often don't listen to our voices telling us we're procrastinating is that we don't think it's a big deal. So why just put one thing in the chat box? Why do you think we do procrastinate? Yeah, not excited, unpleasant, anxious, don't like it, don't want to. All of the above. You all know, don't you? There's always more fun things to be doing, aren't there, Brittany? I always think I have more time. Absolutely. Just don't want to, rather be doing something else, bored, don't know where to start. Self-doubt, that's a huge one, Laura, for a lot of people. And yet what we do is we feed some of these things, don't we? By procrastinating, it actually feeds some of the things that we're talking about here. And then we start beating ourselves up. Thomas, we say we'll do it later, and then later comes, and then we know the deadline's getting closer, and all of a sudden we're starting to feel guilty about it, and then we're beating ourselves up over it, and then we put it off again because now it's making us feel guilty, and we just don't want to think about it. It just compounds, doesn't it? Oh, Lisa, that's a true, true perfectionist speaking there. I want it done just right. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah, how long can it take? 5 minutes? Well, add a zero, right, Brittany? Because sometimes things grow. And that's one of the tips for today, is that if you do have something that you think is going to take 5 minutes, make it 10. Schedule 10. If it takes 5, you now have 5 minutes to chit chat if you want, or tack that 5 minutes onto something else that got crowded in. So yeah, Diane, want it done right, interrupted a lot. Yeah. And so we have to take control of some of that, don't we? I put down it's an unpleasant task. Like many of you said, it's boring. I don't have skills. These are the things that you've already mentioned. But if it's unpleasant, it's not going to get any more pleasant when you do it. If it's boring, it's not going to get more boring when you finally do it. What happens is if you get rid of it right away, then you don't have the unpleasant boring over your head. A lack of skills, how are you ever going to get them if that's one of your hesitations? A fear of failure. Somebody mentioned that. I don't know how to do it. It's a lack of skills, self-doubt, all of those kinds of things. And sometimes even fear of success. Because what happens when we do succeed at something that somebody has assigned to us? What often happens? A lot of you are typing, and I bet it's going to be similar answers. Yeah, you get more of it, don't you? They come to you, new and harder work. You're it. You'll get stuck doing it again, all of the above. And the funny thing is, when we get a new task and we do it well, and somebody comes and asks us to do it again because we did it well the first time, we kind of hold on to our lapels, our metaphorical lapels, and feel really good about that, don't we? But by about the fifth time, we're thinking, give it to somebody else. I've got stuff I need to do. So sometimes there's a bit of fear of success in there because the expectations will be higher, won't they? We just have too much to do. I bet if we were face to face and I just asked you to raise your hands real quick and I said, how many of you feel like you have too much to do? Most of us would raise our hands, including Linda Bruno. But again, The fact that we're procrastinating something that's there doesn't lessen the workload. We have plenty of time, like somebody mentioned, got plenty of time to do this until we don't. And then we rush. And I've had people tell me that they work better under pressure. Most studies, not all, because I read one, and I've only read one that says the opposite, but most studies show that indeed we do not work better under pressure, we just work faster. So yeah, we get it done faster, but are we doing our best work and do we feel good about ourselves? And of course, a lot of this, as I mentioned earlier, because of those pathways in our brains, has just become habit. So think about that for yourself and just understand which of these is most relevant to you. The more you understand that, the more aware you are the next time it creeps in, and the more you're able to say, because everybody in this room can say to themselves, this isn't going to serve me well, and I'm not going to procrastinate this time. It's possible. It's physically possible. It's mentally possible. It's emotionally possible. It's a choice, isn't it? It's the same as any other habit. You just have to say, nope, not going down that path again. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make sure I keep moving forward. But I do want to admit that there are a few times that it might be a good thing. But here's what I want you to hear. You can't use this as an excuse when it really isn't the reason. Do you hear the difference between those two words? We have excuses for procrastinating and we have good reasons for procrastinating, and ne'er the twain shall meet because they're two different things. These are good reasons sometimes when we procrastinate. One is to incubate and create. I actually do this a lot with programs. If somebody asks me to do a new program, I don't start on it immediately. I might jot down a couple of ideas, but because of the way my brain is wired, I need to think about it. Not necessarily write it down, not necessarily even start researching right away, but to give it some thought, to think about what's going to be the most beneficial to the people that are listening to this information. Yes, emotions can be high, absolutely. So my husband used to teach college, and I can remember he had somebody turn in a late paper, and he asked them why it was late, and they said, well, I need to incubate and create. Well, that didn't quite fly because they had 6 weeks to do the paper, so that was obviously an excuse, wasn't it? And his comment to me was, what an excuse. That's not even true. And I said, well, it could be true for some people because it's true for me. And then when I explained to him what my process is, he got it. But obviously with 6 weeks to do the paper, they were using that as an excuse. Yeah, take a moment to think. Diane, for me, it's more than a moment. And absolutely, Ronald, when emotions are high, you might need to procrastinate, especially if you're in a conflict situation or something like that. Absolutely. Both of those are true. And as I said, Diane, it takes me a day, a week, sometimes a month to think through it and incubate and create, but always I have deadlines established for myself so that the steps of whatever I need to do don't slip by me and then crowd me. That's what I'm doing as a favor to myself. I don't say, okay, Luli's program is due August 1st. I need to think about it. And then I just let it go until July 25th. No, I write it on my calendar that maybe by July 10th, I need to have my research done. And by July 20th, I need to have notes made for the handouts. And by July 25th, I need to have the handouts done and the PowerPoint and the answer key and all those kinds of things. So there still has to be a plan, doesn't there? If you're incubating and creating, there still needs to be a plan. Sometimes you just need an energy surge. Don't ask me to do something that requires a lot of brain cells after about 7 o'clock at night. I'm still here. I can read fiction, literature. I can do a few things. I can fold laundry. I can do those things. But if you said at 7 o'clock at night, this is when we're going to have our brainstorming meeting to talk about what this program should involve, I'd have to say, nah, that's not going to work for me. I need to put this off until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon or sometime before I lose my energy. And I understand that about myself. I happen to be an introvert. So introverts need quiet time. They need processing time. And now that I understand that about myself, I don't pressure myself by doing things when I'm not productive. So the energy surge is something that's a legitimate reason many times. The timing is simply off. This is not a good time to start this. Right now, I've got a project that I'm working on, but I have 3 other things that need to be done in the next week or so. The project has a piece of my mind, if you will. There's some attention going to that project, maybe a little bit of incubating and creating, and I'm just itching to go. And that's where I would like to be focusing my time right now. But the timing is off. It's not a good time for me to do that because then those other things are really going to either not be done as well as I could because I hurried through them, or they're going to be done at a time that wasn't agreed upon. So sometimes the timing is just off. And then sometimes there's intuition. Here's the one that can really trip us up because we'll definitely use this as an excuse. But I can remember this happening to me once many years ago when I was still doing a little bit of corporate training. I am very fortunate now because I only work with libraries. So that's one of the best parts of my job. But at this time, a local university had a corporate training department and they wanted me to do some training. And the director called me one day and she said, I've got a client that's interested in this and this is right up your alley. And what do you think? And we'll be doing it in July and blah, blah, blah. I got excited. New project. I get to learn. They get to learn. It's all good. She said, put together an outline for me. Start creating the program, the curriculum. So I put together a brief outline and I sent it to her. Oh, this is just what they're looking for. But something just didn't seem right. It didn't seem like it had been fleshed out enough, like they had really given enough thought to whether they could actually pay for the program, fun things like that. And so I had my outline done and had jotted just some very skeletal notes so that I could get started pretty quickly when it was released, but I didn't do it. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, she emailed me and she said, I'm really sorry, but this fell through. And I went, whew, I didn't do all that work for nothing. So sometimes it's our intuition. But had I used that as an excuse on a program that I was almost positive would come through, then I'm going to get hurt, aren't I? So know who you are and whether you're using some of these legitimate reasons as an excuse to put things off. That is a real time robber when we procrastinate. And let's look at why. Because it wastes time. If we're putting it off, we're having to rethink about it over and over again while we're putting it off, aren't we? So every time we're doing that, we're wasting time. Whereas if we just get it done, it's done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. So wasted time is one of the issues for being aware of our procrastination. Missed opportunities. For me, because I'm self-employed, this is big. If I put something off, and I look at my calendar and I think, well, I've got time to do that. And I legitimately do have time to do that. I've got development time plugged in at different times on my calendar. But what if I know that in my mind I can put this off until June because I've got development time scheduled in June, but I've already known about this for 2 months and I just haven't done anything with it. And lo and behold, a really nice project drops into my lap that has to be done by June 15th. I'm going to have to miss that opportunity, aren't I? Because I've got too many other things going on now that I didn't go ahead and work on when I could have. Yeah, missed opportunities, absolutely, Ronald. And low performance, absolutely. All of the above. I put poor performance, same word, right, Ronald? I don't know about you, but I never want to do poorly intentionally. And we kind of are if we're putting something off and then rushing through it, knowing that we're not giving it our full attention or the full research that needs to be done or whatever, then our quality of work isn't as good. And that doesn't feel good to the human psyche. So be aware that procrastination can create poor performance. Increased stress. Our brains are absolutely phenomenal. But one of the things they do is they hold on to things that they know we need to be paying attention to. And those things develop little thunder clouds, is how I picture them, in the back of my brain, rolling around back there with that constant low level tension of not getting it done. And so then I've increased my stress level, haven't I? My stress level gets increased when I know that I have to schedule something a certain way because I already have other things scheduled, and it's perfectly fine and it falls right into my timeline, but I still have stress from that because I like to have everything done. Okay, Heather, thank you. I'm not sure what causes that, but it happens occasionally. Thank you for letting me know. So if we have increased stress, does that not drain energy? Now, there is such a thing as good stress, having a baby, getting married, those kinds of things. But a lot of the stress that the time robbers create for us actually drains our energy. And I don't know about you, but there's enough stuff in my life that drains my energy already. I don't need to be adding to that pile myself by procrastinating. So I want you to think about this. How can you tell when you're procrastinating? What's going on? I'll give you an example. You do the little things instead of the things that need done. You go back and check things off of your to-do list because it makes you feel so good that you got all these things done, except they really didn't need to be done right now. That's one of the ways we can tell we're procrastinating. Do you have a tell, so to speak, where you know in the back of your mind you're putting it off and you probably should not be doing that? Yeah, reading right after dinner. There's nothing else to do, right, Bonnie? Just read. I love to read, so I can get distracted by that so easily and have to actually put my book someplace where it's inconvenient for me to go get it because then I'll keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Doing everything else but the task. Exactly, Danny. Fire up the Netflix. There you go, John. Express my crankiness in most conversations because of the stress, the energy drain, right, Claire? I keep thinking about it, but still don't do it. Phone distractions. Yeah, I can always pick up the phone, text, call somebody so that I don't have to do what I want to do. Susan says, time for chit chat. Continue to think about feeling, but not feeling bad for it, but not doing it, but still not doing it. Here's the thing, though. I cannot follow you around with my magic wand. I have one, believe it or not. But it's worth what I paid for it, which is $1.29. So it's not going to help if I do follow you around because it's your choice, isn't it? It's my choice when I allow time robbers to creep up on me. And I will tell you that, let's say, I want you to picture, if you will, a yardstick. Those old wooden yardsticks that we used to have, 36 inches. Let's look at the 1-inch mark, there's an A, and at the 36-inch mark, there's a Z. So you're on A to Z continuum, and I just use the yardstick as a visual. A to Z. Let's say you're at a D in procrastinating, where you do it, you just can't seem to move past it. What if I could get you to an M just by telling you you have a choice here? What if we could move you farther down that continuum? You're not going to quit procrastinating 100% if that's one of your tendencies, but if we just make a little progress, it will be better. And like I said earlier, when you see progress, you will do more of it because it feels good. Yeah, Ursula, it keeps getting closer, doesn't it? Never goes farther away. Some of us, it's going over things we've already done just to make sure they're right. Right? No, just to make sure we don't have to do something else. Starting and stopping it. When I start working on handouts, I love the research part. I love the flow of ideas that I get when I'm developing a new program. I love the learning that I personally get to do when I'm developing a new program. But then it's time for handouts. And I love the handouts, and I have a lot of people tell me they love the handouts because it's something to refer back to. It helps them stay engaged. They get to fill in the blanks, so it helps them remember. But that's one area I tend to start. And then I think, okay, I can't handle any more today. I'll have to do more tomorrow. Yeah, putting it aside for later, even after you start it, right, Ursula? Saying yes to everything else. We all complain we don't have enough time. And yet that little word yes keeps popping out of our mouth, and that big stack of things we need to be working on keeps getting bigger. Having a birthday party, and what I mean by that is for whatever it is you're supposed to be working on. You know how that is. You look at it again next week, you look at it again in 3 weeks, you might as well have a birthday party for it. Yeah, Melissa, I hear you. Do you know why I have all of these on this list? Because I've been guilty of all of them at one time or another. That's why I tell you I know where they come from. So how do we overcome it? First of all, we recognize it. Y'all got it. I see in the chat box, you've got a handle on that. You understand why we do it because it's just who we are as humans, and some of the things that we looked at, it's unpleasant, it's boring, it's whatever. We know why we do it. But then, and you've already heard this word in a different form, we have to choose to overcome it. In this particular situation, we don't have to say, okay, it's May 5th, and I am never going to procrastinate in my entire life again. That's unrealistic. But I can look and say, okay, these handouts need to be done by Friday, and I'm going to work on them today. It's a choice. Doesn't mean it's what I want to do, can't wait to do it. It just means I'm going to make the choice. We somehow, over the years of having the internet and social media and 24/7, maybe 48/14 comments coming at us from different news articles and things like that, we somehow have decided we don't have choices in a lot of things. But we really do. There's so much in our lives we have choices in. Use your to-do list. Use a to-do list. Put it on there. If you have a birthday party after, 2 weeks or a month or whatever, is it something you even really need to do? Maybe you need to trade tasks with somebody else who would enjoy it more. But this is something that helps me keep things straight. Again, I feel like my life has become a lot more complex, if you will, over the last several years. And there are a lot more things coming at me from different angles, from things that I need to do in my work, from things I need to do at home, from things I need to do in my finances, whatever. I can't remember them all, for one thing. And yet my brain still hangs on to them in the back. I just can't quite focus on them enough to get it done. So using a to-do list can be very helpful in this area. Work backward in your calendar. Best thing I've ever done for myself. Started doing it about 20 years ago. That dates me, doesn't it? But I mentioned this earlier. When I have a program that I know is going to be due on a certain date, I work backward in my calendar and I say, okay, 2 weeks ahead, I need to send the PowerPoint and the handouts to the client. So obviously they need to be totally done by then, along with the answer key. So for me, that deadline is actually a week prior to that, so that if anything does pop up or email's not working or whatever, I still have at least one more week before my deadline is in my mind that I need to send those. So, okay, how long is it going to take me to do this program? Well, I already have a lot of research material on it. So instead of taking me several hours of research, I can cut that in half. So I'm going to move back maybe 2 more weeks to do the research, or 3 weeks. Then I do the outline. Then I do the handouts. That's all charted out on my calendar. Because if it's not, the days go by, folks. Do your days ever go by? Mine go by. So to me, this was one of the most helpful. Yeah, Janice, good. So Janice is testifying that it works for her too. Work backward in your calendar. I've had people say to me, I had a fellow look at me once. We weren't even talking about time robbers. We were just talking about organizational skills. And I mentioned one of the best things that's been for me is working backward. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, but you know those are fake deadlines. And I said, what? He said, you just make them up. I said, yes, and I commit them. I commit myself to them. So they're not fake to me. Again, it's a choice. Yeah, me too, Melissa. Sometimes two, right? Sometimes 17, I will say. So yeah, work backward in your calendar. It can be really helpful to you. Be accountable. Now, I'm not saying you have to have an accountability partner, although on some projects you may want to, if they're pretty significant. That can always be helpful, whether it's your supervisor or just a coworker or somebody else. But here's what I want you to hear. Do this for yourself. Be accountable to yourself. Because if you're not, nobody else is going to value your time. Claire said when someone creates a deadline, it's not fake. It may change, but it's not fake. Exactly. When I'm doing it for myself, it's there. I don't have time to create fake things. I have enough on my plate. Thank you very much. But do be accountable to yourself. And I mentioned earlier trying to get something done just to get it out of the way. There is a little, I think it's a 3-minute movie about eating the frog. And the first I ever heard of it was from a guy by the name of Brian Tracy, and he's big on productivity and organizations and this and that. But anyway, the whole premise is if you know that when you get up tomorrow, at some point during the day, you need to eat a live frog, which I know sounds absolutely absurd. But if you knew that, it's going to make you ill all day long until you just get it over with. That's the whole premise. Now, of course, that's so far out of reach, it doesn't make any sense, but the premise does. The premise is if you've got something you're dreading, if you've got something that is boring, if you've got something that you don't feel comfortable with, do it. Then you take that stress off, then you get rid of that energy drain, then you move forward, then you feel good about yourself. You've probably learned in the process, you've accomplished something, you build momentum to go on to the next thing. So eat the frog. And I heard somebody talk on this once. And again, it wasn't even time robbers. This might have been about decluttering, I think is what this particular, it was a blog or something. They were talking about this and somebody said, what are you going to do for a reward? And this lady that was blogging said, I don't believe in having to reward yourself. You have to do this. And I went, ooh, that doesn't make sense to me. I reward myself a lot. Now, it doesn't have to be anything big for me. It could be a little Lent truffle, or it could be a cup of coffee, or it could be my e-reader, like somebody said earlier. But why not reward yourself? Remember what I mentioned earlier? What gets rewarded gets repeated. It goes both ways, negative and positive. So if I reward myself for, oh my gosh, I did better with procrastination, then I'm going to try harder the next time, right? Sort of like dangling the carrot out there. Reward yourself. Yeah, exactly, Susan. And there's a choice, isn't it? Because a lot of people, let me address that, Susan. Susan said I have to reward myself because not much comes from the top. And there's a choice to be made. I know people in my life that because nothing comes from the top, their woe is me. I just won't work as hard. Who cares? They don't care. Do you really want to live your life that way? Or do you want to say, you know what? I'm going to have a Lent truffle because I did a good job. I don't care whether anybody else recognizes it or not. Would I like to have recognition from the top? Absolutely. Always. We're human. But if we know it's not coming from there, why fall into the muck and mire of feeling unappreciated when we can appreciate ourselves? John, you may. I have an uncle that used to make them himself, frog legs. So absolutely, you may if you want. Robin said, I've been told you're not a dog. You shouldn't reward yourself. Well, I disagree. I respectfully disagree, Robin. And to me, again, it's up to you, isn't it? I really don't understand that whole idea. I think that reward is good for us. Claire said, be your own best friend. Exactly. Yep, there you go. So I hope that's helpful. That little piece right there, reward yourself. So I'm not going to read them, but just do a chat box storm of what you can reward yourself with the next time you make progress with your either procrastination or any other time robber. What would you reward yourself? Let's do a chat box storm. I love this. Look at all the variety in there. I saw a lot of food. Chocolate caught my eye. I saw one that said just something small like twirling in your chair. That'll work because it makes you feel exuberant and excited and energetic and whatever it is. Too much to say, Diane says. Wine, that'll work too. A new outfit, new shoes, whatever. Earrings popped up earlier, a new plant, a chocolate dessert, all of the above. I don't know about you, but doesn't that, y'all typed so fast, I got to think that excites you. So something that's special that you don't normally do for yourself and use that as a reward. And you know what? It doesn't have to be the only time you do it. It just needs to be the reward that you give yourself when you're doing something that's making you feel good about what you're getting done. Be aware of unpleasant consequences. This is another reason to be careful about procrastination. It might be in your job that people look at you like he never gets anything done, or I can't depend on that person, or you don't get a promotion, or you don't get the new opportunity because you never finished the last one I gave you. Those are some unpleasant consequences, aren't there? And then also unpleasant consequences of the stress and the energy drain and all those things we talked about earlier. You might get written up. Absolutely. Who wants that? Realize, though, that procrastination is not necessarily tied to rescheduling. But again, do not use rescheduling. Somebody mentioned earlier those deadlines, they're not fake. I may need to reschedule them, but that's not necessarily procrastination. Maybe I didn't get the research from somebody that I needed and I need to reschedule my deadline or whatever. So sometimes rescheduling can be done without any guilt because it's not necessarily procrastination. But again, don't use it as an excuse. Okay, the next few pages are mostly already typed for you. And the reason for that is there's so much information here that I wanted to make sure you had it at your fingertips without having to write it all down. So I hope that's helpful to you. But we're on page 3, and right after the first few lines, it says, "Don't interrupt me," just like it does on the slide. Here's what you need to hear. And I saw this earlier as interruptions being one of the things that was a time robber. Make sure you're not using it as an excuse to stop what you're doing. I had somebody tell me once, I've got a candy dish on my desk, and every time somebody comes to get candy, they interrupt me. Well, yeah, I'm going to come and interrupt you if I can, if you have candy on your desk, if it's chocolate, especially. But what I heard there was this person really liked that interaction, which is wonderful, but maybe only put the candy dish out in the afternoon or the last hour of the day or whatever it is, because what I heard there was, woe is me, all of these people interrupt me, and I know it's the candy, but I don't want to give up the candy. Well, that's an excuse to stop what you're doing. Brittany said, "Candy ninja, slip in." Yeah, slip in, take some candy with zero eye contact, and then leave. That's great. I love that. Yeah, exactly. Because you don't interrupt anybody's work that way. And like I said, if that person finds themselves being interrupted too much, then just tell everybody, I want to make sure I get my work done, but I don't want to give up your candy. So I'm going to put it out there the last hour of my shift every day or whatever. So yeah, you can do that. So the next part of your page 3 talks about interruptions that you have pretty commonly and some ways that you can deal with them. So I'm just going to read a few of these, and you can check them as I read them. I didn't put them all on slides because we would have had way too many slides to flip through. But if the interruption is in person, just ask them, why did they come to see you? Now, don't say, why are you here? That's pretty abrupt, isn't it? What can I help you with today? How can I help you today? What can I do for you? Just something casual, but it helps direct their attention instead of the chit chat for 5 minutes before we ever get around to what we really need. Again, chit chat is not bad, only when it's taking up all of your time. The next one is stand when they enter your workspace. It might be the room you're working in. It might be your workspace. It might be behind the desk. If you stand, it's a signal that there's movement going to happen, that we're not going to get comfortable here. Suggest a later meeting and give time limits. That's a very easy one to do. Or a meeting in their workspace. Then you control when you leave. If you say, I can't spend a lot of time on this right now because I'm in the middle of this, but I can come over at 2. I'll be over in your workspace at 2. And then when you go over, you control when you leave. You can avoid or at least limit chit chat. You can get up and leave. And I have to explain that one for sure. When I say that, what I mean is you stand up, you're still cordially speaking to them, but you start walking. You may walk to the restroom. You may walk to the water fountain, if we still do that these days, or we will again someday. You may pick up something that needs filed and walk, or pick up something that needs to go to somebody else and walk, or whatever. But what that tends to do is it lets people know that you're wrapping up your conversation when you get to the place you're going. So get up and leave if you need to. Make sure your chairs aren't too comfortable. I told somebody once, stack something on them. And this person said, my boss comes in and sits on the paperwork that's on my chair. And I said, well, you could put something really bumpy there that wouldn't be comfortable. But the way that one came about, I have to tell you, and I don't want you to do this, but I have to tell you where that idea came from. years ago, in what I call my former life, I was in purchasing, and I went to a full day workshop on purchasing for the newly appointed buyer because I'd never done it before. And one of the things they talked about was windy salespeople. In other words, a salesperson comes in and wants to just be your best friend because they figure that's how they're going to sell you something. Somebody in the room spoke up and said, my predecessor cut 2 inches off of only the front 2 legs of the.
Can anyone hear me? Deb, can you hear me? Oh, my goodness. Okay, so thank you everybody for your patience. I appreciate that. I know we might have lost a few people, but thankfully, this is maybe the only program I do where I've got so much actually typed on your handout. So what I'm going to do is just review what's there and why it's there, and then you can go through and pick out the things that are meaningful to you. So we talked about interruptions in person. There's a whole line there for you to think about interruptions on the phone. Standing during the phone call so you don't get too comfortable, not propping your feet up, having something in front of you, etc. So that's interruptions on the phone. And I know this is going to be a little quick, but this is all on your handouts. If you're on the phone or in person, you can make comments like, I'm in the middle of something right now. Can I get back to you at 1 o'clock or whatever it might be? Getting them back on track, you can say something like you were saying and reroute them. And interruptions with email, whoops, I went too far that time. So interruptions with email, darn it. Oh, now I'm trigger happy. Turn off your incoming email alert if you can, if you're not at a point in your job where you need to be tied to that. You can see the rest of those for email. Meetings has a lot of really good information on there. One is a big one. If you are part of it, if you have something to do with it, do an agenda and use it. Start and end on time. Really key things. Does there even need to be a meeting? Those can be such time robbers, can't they? But if you look under Meeting Madness, which is a full page, basically, 2/3 of page 4 and the top half of page 5, there are so many tips there for you to use about meetings. If you go to meetings where you feel like you don't even belong, maybe mention that to the person that's leading the meeting and say, you won't hurt my feelings if you don't include me because I know that I maybe could be doing something that's more productive. So just volunteer that information and be able to do that. Have people take care of the time at a meeting. Have people take notes at the meeting so that the person running the meeting isn't doing everything which causes the meeting to have hiccups while they're taking notes and while they're trying to figure out if they're on time and all those kinds of things. So all of that has to do with meetings. So think about this. We talked a lot about procrastination. We talked some before we got interrupted so rudely. We talked about interruptions. You have a whole page full of information about meetings. I want you to think about before you exit the room today, and I know it's very close to that time, but where have you decided to make a change? I'm not asking you to change your entire process. I'm not asking you to try for perfection. I'm asking you to make one step that will lead you closer to controlling and arresting the time robbers in your life. The next segment talks about just saying no. You know you can say that if you want. There's a list of questions there for you to answer. The last question, when someone gives you an estimate of how long the requested job will take, double the estimate before you decide if you have time. Somebody mentioned that earlier. It's always more time than they tell you, isn't it? So thanks, but no thanks. What might you consider saying no to? Here's the thing. The definition of insanity, you know it, you've heard it, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you leave here today and you do the exact same things with your time that you've always done, you will still be entertaining the time robbers. So I hope you've chosen something because it is your choice. You can choose what you'll do differently as a result of what we've covered today. And I'm sorry we didn't have a little bit more time for discussion on those last couple of things, but you do have my email address. on the bottom of the first page of your handouts, as well as in the chat box. Feel free to email me anytime if you need to address a specific time robber. I'm always happy to respond. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again for your patience. You make that part of things easier for me when we have a hiccup, so thank you for that. Thanks, Luli, for your support. I know it's frustrating for you too. I know we all understand technology. We all love it, and we all don't love it always. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. We understand when technology goes wrong, Luli. I don't understand how it works, and obviously there are a whole bunch of people out there that don't, right? Including the people that design these things. They all have their hiccups. I cannot hear you, Luli. Exactly, Dale. It's great until it isn't. And let's face it, it's great most of the time. If we're being honest with ourselves, it really is great most of the time. Thank you, Luli, and thanks again for your support behind the scenes. Thanks, Deb, for being patient while all of that was happening. I always like to see your smile up there, so thanks, everybody.